Hi, my name is Vivian.
My name is Aditi.
And we are here at the GreenCircle Eco-farm. We work on a soil regeneration project, which is an education and research project in partnership with National Parks Board. And over about 2 to 3 years, we're actually working with different community gardens in different parts of Singapore to share about how do you regenerate soil. And most of these community gardens would take on the practices that we have shared with them, and depending on what resources they have available, then they will regenerate the soil, and then we'll do studies with them, and we'll find out how the process has benefited their gardening and also the plants that they're growing. So Aditi is the soil expert in our team.
So within the project, we have the research pod and we also have an education pod, which means that we are trying to design courses and programs where we talk about soil and we bring soil into the conversation, be it on climate change, be it about community, be it about health and wellness and, holistic well-being. So we're just trying to showcase soil because we feel like soil hasn't been included in a lot of these larger conversations. Because soil ends up being the big connector to so many other parts of our ecology and our ecosystems.
And both Aditi and I have a little bit of farming background. I was kind of dabbling in it in Chiang Mai for a couple of years. And Aditi, you want to share a bit about your experience?
Yeah, I worked on farms in the US and in India, specifically on Dr. Vandana Shiva's farm that was working on biodiversity in seeds and plants and crops. And then also here in Singapore, I've worked on a farm that does vertical farming. So yeah, different kinds of farming as well.
Yeah, so we really believe in soil-based agriculture, and that's why we're so excited that this place exists and that we can actually look into how the soil has been evolving over the years as well.
So we are at GreenCircle Eco-farm. We're just going to talk a bit about the soil ecology, the ecology of the food forest, and we're also now going to talk about the soil. So we've come to one of the beds, and the best way to maybe look at soil is maybe move a bit of the top layer. The top layer often has, as you can see, it's not fully broken down yet, right? So it'll be like leaves, branches, twigs, things like that, bark, if you can see over here. So all of this is great because it's decomposers are going to do their job and break these things down, and the earthworms will build tunnels, and they'll take all of that down deeper into the soil. So all of that is happening, and that's why the top layer is also great. Another thing in farming that we do is called mulching. So as you can see over here, this bed has actually been mulched. So that means taking leaves, taking any cuttings, anything that you may have, and then covering the soil kind of like a blanket. And what is great about this blanket is that then it enables the soil to stay moist, right? Because Singapore, we live in a really tropical climate, which means we have the sun beating down on us like we do right now. And so that helps the soil maintain an average temperature, right? And that means that the species living in the soil are able to be covered and comfortable. Another thing, and you can actually see as I move this here, you can actually see there's some spiders crawling here. As you see more and more insects, all of that is also, we have an earthworm there. So this is all great. It's already right at the top level of the soil, so we can only imagine what is deeper down within. Something we just mentioned earlier is that the more species you see, the more diversity you see, that actually is a great indicator for healthy soil. Another great indicator for healthy soil is color, specifically here in Singapore. We naturally tend to have clay soil, mostly in the central parts of Singapore. Maybe obviously closer to the water, we have some sandy soil. But our soil is usually quite clayey, which means that it ends up being quite sticky. It can kind of compact down. That's one of the characteristics of clay soil. But healthy soil is usually quite fluffy, right? Quite light. And what you can see here is the color. And what this color usually will indicate to us that it's quite nutrient rich and nutrient dense. And when we say this color, it's because these things, which would be the leaves, the roots, the shoots, leftover maybe food, fallen, like maybe from fruits, etc., have fallen and they've been breaking down, right? So when they break down, what we get is soil that is a darker color. Now there's things, we can go into a bit of like the chemistry of it, but there's things like glomalin, etc. These things also then help with the structure of the soil, which means it keeps the soil together. and not loose and spilling. Because what you want is good structured soil. Because good structured soil makes sure that if there's a lot of rainfall, soil doesn't flow away. It also ensures that then the nutrients stay in the soil. So these are all really good examples of how soil stays healthy and rich. One of the great things about a food forest, which we are in right now at GreenCircle, is that whatever the soil needs is already here. So there doesn't have to be anything coming from externally, right? So there's leaves probably dropping from the taller trees and shrubs. There's these lower grasses that grow that are probably cut back and then laid back onto the soil. There's many different shrubs that are growing around it. So all of these, as their leaves fall, their shoots fall, that adds to the health and the nutrition of the soil. And then even I know they do composting here themselves. So all of the things from around the farm are utilized and they go back into the soil. So that is what makes our food healthy, because the soil is so healthy, right? Because it's a very interconnected system. It's not separate. So another special thing about being in the space that we are is that Singapore is a tropical rainforest, right? I mean, naturally, that is the kind of geographical and ecology that we live in. So what this means is that it's very hot, but it's also very rainy, and plants can grow really fast, which is actually great, right? Anuj was explaining to us earlier, right? Some of our younger forests are 20, 30, 40 years old, and those are considered young. But if you take that up to a temperate climate, it would actually take even longer for trees and things to grow there, just because of the variety of trees that would grow in those climates. They don't have the heat, they don't have the humidity and the moisture that we have in our tropical climate. So that actually does mean that grasses will grow much faster, shrubs will grow much faster. So all of that actually ends up being a great contributor for our ecosystem and our ecology. Actually, this is from a very recent thing, but very specifically, we've been on a very veggie-focused diet, my husband and my family, very recently, and we've been buying regularly from the regular supermarkets. And very recently, we bought some veggies from Fireflies, and even in the cooking process of it, you can feel, you can taste, and even the texture of the leaves change. In that they end up being a lot more fibrous-y, not as wet and full of water, not so just the texture of it. So I'm just talking about the taste, but we are more experienced with soil and growing food in soil. So pivoting to that portion of it, I would say in the soil, when you're growing food in soil, you take care of the soil, and then the soil will take care of plants, right? And enables plants to grow. So when you take care of soil, it essentially basically means, either composting or mulching, etc. But using things from hopefully around you to nurture and care for the soil. So if your soil is healthy, then that will translate to your plants being healthy, because they're inextricably linked. But when you grow things not in soil, right? So be that hydroponically, aquaponically, I don't know if I should be naming all of these things, but if you grow not in soil-based growing mediums, what ends up happening is that the farmer or whoever's caretaking of those plants ends up having to measure nutrients and calculate, this is how much this plant needs, this is how much we need to give to this plant. In my personal philosophy, I think that is problematic, because as a human being, or even just someone external, how do you know how much a plant needs, right? There could be research done into this, but just like human beings, not all plants are the same, even within the same species, based on the environment around it, the climate, which position the plant is facing. So many things can affect what I would need for my own food and nutrients. So imagine the same thing for a plant, right? Based on where I am, I'm feeling very thirsty now because I'm out in a farm, I'm sweating a lot, right? So my needs are judged by my feelings and my needs and my requirements. So it's the same thing for a plant, is you can have a recommended amount of certain N, P, K, all the different nutrients you need to add to those plants. But how do you know that is the perfect blend or the perfect mix? It's not possible. But in soil, all those things are already available. So the plant can, just like how when we pick our plate, the plant will pick from its plate in the soil and be like, hey, I'm feeling weaker in this right now. I will absorb more potassium, or I will absorb more nitrogen, right? So that's kind of my belief, and what I believe makes it different for soil-based growing food and non-soil-based growing food.
It's the complexity of the the diversity in the soil that's actually going to make the plant have more nutrient complexity and nutrient density. And so we're talking about taste profile, right? But we're also talking about the different health benefits that will be in the plant itself. And from what Aditi shared is also how like plants are living beings and they have the intelligence, and we want to eat plants that are intelligent, right? We want to eat plants that's healthy so that we can also receive those benefits, because we are what we eat and we are what our food eats as well. Yeah, so it becomes a very integral part of us. And I think like to quote Mr. Tang is like, well, you know, when you feed a child, you can feed a child processed food and the child will still grow, right? The child will still grow big, but you know, is the child healthy, right? But if you want to eat something like that is good, then your health, your immunity will be much stronger. So yeah, in terms of some other types of methods of streamlining to grow food, they may look very big and beautiful or flawless, right? But maybe it's not as nutrient dense. So when you eat it, you may not receive that much benefits. Yeah.
And health, just to jump on to what you're saying, is health translates to taste, right? So
Yeah.
if you have healthy plants, then the idea is that then they will also be full of taste and a variety of tastes and flavors and around our palate, etc. So it's all connected, just like we discussed
We can
earlier.
go on.
And just to
Same.
jump in, right?
Yes.
I think that is a beautiful way to link to biodiversity as well, because we know that plants are connected through the fungal networks.
Yes.
Each one of them are talking to each other. Hey, I don't have enough nutrients today. Let me go and extend my roots and take it from the other side. And so that is sort of creating a balance. And if you have a more diverse plate of non-food crop plants, then that is actually providing a richer soil biota as well.
Correct.
So that leads to a healthier food plant as well.
Correct.
So you are eating healthier if you have more ecology in your place. So I find that fascinating, and I think that is just so not talked about in non-soil-based agricultural systems.
Yes.
Yeah.
Correct.
And I think in terms of like microbiology, like our gut microbiome and all that, it's still relatively new,
Sure.
right, as a science. So people are just discovering about how that diversity in our gut flora is so important to our immunity. And if we only eat plants or eat food that is very narrow, then we will not have that complexity to fight off diseases and and because like viruses and all that, they do morph very quickly. So it's something that we need to be able to have something alive to be able to fight it in that sense. So I think in so far as food production is concerned, I think it's important. We're talking about diversity, biodiversity. I think it's important to diversify, and the fact that we don't want to put all our eggs into one basket. So I understand that there is a need for like quantity and looking at production through that perspective, but we also want to also remember about quality, right? So how can we coexist? And I think the reason why I think this place deserves to be preserved is because there's so much knowledge and so much information and wisdom that we haven't actually had the chance to learn from. So if we have that opportunity, I think that would be really great. And the future of farming, what is going to be like, it's still, I feel that it's still like an open book and like we don't know, right? Yeah, so I think that's really important to preserve it so that we have that opportunity.
Yeah, and jumping from that, I would say we've talked so much about diversity, and when we talk about the future of farming, I see the future of our farming being as diverse as possible. I hope that we can have different types of agriculture in different shapes, forms, locations, with different people involved in it. So when we talk about diversity, it's not a one-dimensional diversity. It's diversity, across the spectrum, up, down, vertical, horizontal, diagonal, every direction, because that is what creates resilience. And that's exactly what I think we are striving for.
And for me, it's a combination of the two. We need a resilient system and a system that actually brings in the ecology, the biodiversity. So it's not just resilient for us, but it's also resilient for the larger ecosystem in which we live in.